Thanks. Okay, and then we'll wait for. So I'm not sure if we have some people attending. We're waiting for more people to attend, and then we will get the webinar started soon. 16 participants, so we're going to get started relatively quickly. And I'm hoping everybody can hear me. So hello, everyone. My name is Marie Protesto. I am hosting tonight with United Spinal Association Greater Philadelphia. Before we get started, I would like to thank the Nelson Foundation for sponsoring our webinar series. And I'd also like to ask everybody to hold questions until the end. It'll probably be a little bit easier. I'm going to say you can put everything in the chat as the recording and as we're going about doing the webinar, and then we can answer those questions towards the end. I will do my best with answering waved hands. I'm not always good with that because I'm not the usual host, but I'll try my best. I would like to welcome Shiv Hiremath. Shiv has completed his PhD and postdoctorate fellowship training at the University of Pittsburgh. Currently, he is an assistant professor at the Department of Health and Rehabilitation Sciences in Temple University. Dr. Hiremath is also the director of the Personal Health Informatics and Rehabilitation Engineering Laboratory at Temple University. His research focuses on the studying the health and physical activity of people with disabilities in the community through wearable sensors and smartphone-based technologies. So with that said, I'd like to welcome Shiv Hiremath. So thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you so much for the introduction. Let me share my screen. And is the screen visible? Do you see my?
I do.
Okay, great. So should I start, Marie? I can go ahead.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yes,
thank you.
Go ahead.
All right. Oh, sorry. Hello, everyone. I'm Shiv Hiremath. I'm a faculty in the Department of Health and Rehabilitation Sciences. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Marie Protesto and as well as the United Spinal Association of the Greater Philadelphia chapter for inviting me to present our work. The research that I'm presenting here is been conducted in the past 10 years. So, please put your questions, and, I don't have a lot of slides, so we will definitely have time to interact and chat or discuss your questions. So the topic of my presentation today, the larger umbrella of the research is the physical activity and health with individuals with disabilities. And the specific topic that I'm presenting today is developing and translating mHealth or mobile health technologies from laboratory to community for individuals with spinal cord injury. I wanted to take this opportunity to also congratulate the United Spinal Association on the 75th anniversary. I think I have learned a lot through this organization as through their newsletters and also through a various number of programs that they conduct. So the outline of my talk, I'm going to break it into two things. The first thing is I want to focus, or I want to highlight on something called as a physical activity monitoring system, how we developed a physical activity monitoring system. The second part of the talk will focus on how do we take these types of technologies that were developed in the lab or evaluated in the lab and test it in the community in participants with spinal cord injury in the community. So just to introduce the larger topic here, Healthy People 2020 has indicated that 54% of 50 million individuals with disabilities in the US do not perform regular physical activities. And again, this number is higher than the general population, which is about 36%. And of this population, there are about 3.3 million wheelchair users. Regular physical activity, as we all know, is crucial, and it is even more crucial in wheelchair users as it is associated with increased aerobic capacity and flexibility, muscular strength and endurance, improved psychological well-being, and reduced risk of cardiovascular disease and other chronic conditions. Research has indicated that only 20% of persons with spinal cord injury reported regular physical activity. And again, this is not, it's also associated with, lack of accessible equipment, environmental barriers, and also physiological changes that individuals go through, which limits them to perform the physical activity. A question that often comes is, can wheelchair users attain the recommended physical activity levels? There are two guidelines, and today's guidelines, I'll bring one guideline today, which is for individuals with spinal cord injury. The guideline from the Centers for Disease Control in the United States is 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity activity. So that's about 30 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity physical activity for 5 days a week. Now, is that feasible in individuals with disabilities? It depends on the population and depends on the type of disability. But again, there are specific guidelines for SCI, which I'll present at a later slide. What is possible, what has been done in general population and has been picked up in many individuals, many populations with disabilities include self-monitoring of diet, physical activity, and body weight, which can assist in maintaining a healthy lifestyle. For my research, I chose a small portion of this, which is physical activity, like how can we track physical activity for individuals with disabilities. And there are a number of sensors or technologies available, but what is done for individuals who use assistive technologies such as wheelchairs? Surveys are available, but as we all know, it's associated with a lot of effort to fill these surveys. There are certain challenges that one would face with recall, and it is good. It is an inexpensive way of tracking physical activity, but there may not be enough time to do this on a regular basis. Again, in the general population, what we have seen is that there are a number of devices that are available and apps that are available to measure physical activity. However, the adoption of these technologies or making these technologies accessible in individuals with disabilities has been slow. And research like ours and others in the field is trying to push that envelope to make these types of companies and technologies accessible so that everyone can be on the same platform and use these types of devices to measure physical activity. So that led me to develop my doctoral dissertation work, which was conducted at the University of Pittsburgh. And there, the laboratory, my PhD advisor, Dr. Dan Ding, and we developed something called as a physical activity monitor system. And what it is it can evaluate it. Our goal was to develop and evaluate a new physical activity monitoring system that wheelchair users can use. And the device looks something like this, where there is an accelerometer that went on the upper arm. This was a collaboration with a researcher from Northeastern University. Then there was a wheel rotation monitor. This is another sensor that goes on the wheelchair wheel on the spokes of the manual wheelchair. And they transmit information in real time via Bluetooth to a smartphone. And in the smartphone, again, one of my colleagues who came from information science helped us develop this app. We have developed algorithms that track the activity levels, classify the type of activity, and then estimate the either the energy expenditure or the distance traveled. While we were designing these types of things, we conducted usability studies. We contacted participants to understand what is useful for them, what type of information is useful for them to see while they are using this type of technology in the community. Again, this work was conducted at the University of Pittsburgh, US Department of Veterans Affairs, which is the laboratory where I was pursuing my PhD, also called as Human Engineering Research Laboratories, and we had a collaboration with Northeastern University. So the way we tested this or developed this was in the laboratory setting. We asked participants to come into the lab. We collected data while they were performing activities in the lab. We also collected activities while they were wearing these types of sensors while performing different types of wheelchair games at the National Veterans Wheelchair Games. And some of the participants who came to our lab also allowed us to come to their homes, and we were able to ask them to perform various types of activities that they perform using their own wheelchairs. And it ranged from resting, arm ergometry, to, as you can see, various types of activities. Some of them were structured and some of them were unstructured, just like a person does in their regular environment. Here is a video of a person with spinal cord injury performing data collection in the laboratory setting. So the first activity was resting, and you can see that certain types of activities might just involve upper extremity movement, and certain other activities might involve intermittent use of the wheelchair. So how can we use information from both the assistive technology as well as the person's arms to classify or to detect if someone's doing an activity that is intense or that is light intensity, and then accordingly use their demographic parameters such as their weight, height, and gender to estimate their physical activity level in terms of energy expended. A question that also comes often is, how do we know if they are pushing their own wheelchair or someone else is assisting? If we have two types of sensors that are collecting data, it's easier to distinguish self-propulsion versus assisted propulsion or someone else pushing. A disadvantage of using just movement-based sensors are when someone does resistance-based activities, that's the resistance bands or different types of weights, it's a bit harder to distinguish what type of weight they are using. But that's because of the limitation of just the movement-based sensors. So just to give you an idea how the data looks like, again, this is in the background. This is the graph that you see with the black line is when it is related, or it's from the upper arm movement. Again, this is an average movement that's quantified. And whenever they use their wheelchair, you can see information in blue. So this information is utilized. There are certain statistical characteristics that are estimated from this data, which in turn can be classified into different activities that a person is doing. When it comes to energy expenditure, we could see that this is measured using a portable metabolic cart or an energy expenditure estimation device, and it could go for resting. It went from about 1 kilocalorie to someone playing wheelchair basketball. It went up to about 4.5 kilocalorie per minute, which is also a moderate to vigorous intensity activity, where if someone had a 1 kilocalorie kilocalorie per minute of energy expenditure, 4.5 times is the metabolic equivalent of the task that they're performing. So the way it is structured is basically, these are distributed, or these are broken down into 3 groups. And there are machine learning algorithms. Again, this machine learning algorithms are algorithms that are developed in the laboratory, and depending on the sensor patterns or depending on the human movement patterns, they will allow us to classify if this was the true activity that someone performed. They will allow us to predict what activity an individual is doing. So the answers that are on the diagonal are the correct result or correct answers or correct estimations. The predictions or estimations on the non-diagonal elements are misclassifications. They were misclassified. However, the clusters indicate that if someone were doing an activity that was stationary, that the wheelchair was stationary or wheelchair was continuously moving when they were propelling their wheelchair, or these are the three activities when the wheelchair is continuously moving or may involve some movement. Again, these are seen when someone's at their home or in the office where they intermittently move their wheelchair just a bit. So this helps us kind of cluster the activities to what someone might be doing in the community or in their homes. What we learned from this research is that regression equations, again, these are models that they chose demographic characteristics to estimate energy expenditure. Energy expenditure using PAMS, the system we developed, was better than what was available for the general population. So if we took the sensors from off the shelf versus this system, we were able to better estimate the physical activity levels. We also saw that the multimodal information, the information from two sensors, the arm and the wheelchair, was better, was utilized better, or gave us better information to quantify wheelchair-based activities. Some of the limitations included that the participants with SCI who took part in our study were, again, they volunteered to take part in the study. They were an active population, and we relied on movement-based variables to identify the types of activities someone was doing. So this, also building on our research, and several other researchers across the globe have started studying these types of sensors or devices. And some have used these types of wearable devices to measure light and moderate intensity physical activity, sedentary, light and moderate to vigorous intensity physical activity. Others have used to estimate, similar to ours, energy expenditure, just based on the wrist accelerometer. So, a researcher has used it to measure temporal parameters of wheelchair propulsion. So when someone's pushing their wheelchair, when do they hold their rim versus when are they releasing the rim to push to the next cycle? Activity monitors have also been used to detect propulsion, that's the wheelchair propulsion versus non-propulsion and other activities. So overall, the research in the last 10 years by various researchers across the globe has led to companies like Apple to incorporate or develop models that can help wheelchair users to track their physical activity. We have, again, spoken to participants with spinal cord injury in our research studies. There are some challenges, but making this accessible has, definitely made individuals track their own activity levels in the community using just off-the-shelf activity monitors. While Apple has done this, we cannot use this device to measure research-oriented data. So for that, we have to use Android-based devices, which I'll show next. Once I developed the system, I got a faculty position at Temple University, and I was very curious to translate that technology to people in the community. So in this, what you can see is that there are, we are using off-the-shelf activity monitors. Again, this is just a regular Android smartwatch, and this is a bike odometer that's based on Bluetooth. So we were very curious how this technology can be translated to the community, and we wrote a grant to the Craig H. Nielsen Foundation, and they funded our research. And what we tried was, can we use this technology to track physical activity in the community? And in this particular case, what we saw was we were able to track for the first month. Second month, we were able to provide them with the feedback. And the third month, as they were doing a certain physical activity, we were able to provide them with that information. So we worked very closely with Maggie Rehabilitation Hospital and Moss Rehabilitation Hospital here in Philadelphia to work with the clinicians there and to work with the participants with SCI who are part of their larger groups or peer support groups to participate in this study. So what we saw in this specific study was that individuals benefited tracking their own physical activity over the day. So individuals could access this app and see how they're performing just during that particular day in near real time. And also whenever they met their goals, the graph turned green, indicating that, hey, you have met your goal or your target. The bonus that we thought was really interesting for our participants was this wrist-based smartwatch. And it knows every minute it gets the information of what someone's doing. And if it detects moderate intensity physical activity for a certain duration, like 3 minutes or 4 minutes, then it can trigger on the wrist saying, hey, good job, keep it up. You are 30 minutes left, like, it can tell you how far you are from your goal. So that type of a real-time, just-in-time intervention is called JETI. More of these types of technologies will come in our life. I think some of them already are there, like with our apps and with smartphones when we are crossing certain, when we are using certain GPS type of apps, it tells you about the nearest location, nearest restaurant, or nearest venue that you might wish to visit. But in this case, the context is physical activity that can help our participants do better. We can also, again, these are the larger activities that we had classified into. The person may not be doing the specific activity, but they are doing something similar. So knowing what someone likes to do helps both the participant and the technology to give them context-sensitive intervention to make it exciting, to make it more engaging for our participants. To discuss what we learned from this, the mHealth-based just-in-time adaptive intervention can be used in conjunction with clinician recommendations to provide community-based physical activity interventions. While the energy expenditure remains similar when we did our analysis, 14 of the 16 participants, they were able to increase either the low and moderate intensity physical activities that they like to perform. So in this case, we were able to group participants into individuals who could increase both their low and moderate intensity physical activity, or individuals who only increase their low physical activity levels. So knowing where someone thrives, or what are the types of levels of physical activity someone likes, will be helpful for these types of technologies to provide them interventions that they like to perform and at the level that they like to perform. The other problems or issues that we also saw was that chronic pain, which is common in individuals with spinal cord injury who have been using wheelchairs for some time, chronic pain did interfere with their physical activity levels. And again, an individual being busy at work limited them performing physical activity. Weather, winter months, and lack of accessible environments also made it difficult. We also saw that some of the participants had challenges with their health, again, not related to our study, but related to the hospitalization, which interfered with the study. But these are some things that we can keep in mind in our future research to make sure that they are able to stop the intervention, and once they are back in the community and they are ready, they can restart that type of an intervention to keep themselves motivated or engaged with the physical activity. 11 of the 16 participants who completed the study indicated they were willing to continue participation in the study if it was extended. And that means a lot, because the information that was provided by the app somehow aligned with their interest on what they wanted to see, or how they wanted to experience that specific outcome or intervention. And then we also saw that all 16 participants who completed the study indicated that they would recommend this to their friend or family member who they thought would benefit from it. So I think that was very encouraging to us to continue this particular research and this particular route. Some recommendations were also provided, and that included participants indicating that to make it engaging for them, some sort of a social support and some sort of an encouragement or engagement would allow them to continue using that particular type of a system. So this particular project, which was funded by it was a pilot research project that was funded by the Craig H. Nielsen Foundation, led to other projects. In this particular project, what we are trying to do is currently we are conducting usability studies. And this started in 2020. This is funded by the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living Rehabilitation Research. And in this, what we are doing is we are working with individuals with spinal cord injury and if available, their friends or family members who are also part of performing physical activities to understand what is it that can make it engaging. And in this specific context, what we are trying to do is people can set triggers, especially when they are doing a certain activity or they completed a certain activity. The system can detect it based on their movement or the types of activities that they have been doing. And then the participant with SCI can share with their friend or family member saying, hey, I completed this specific activity, or with their peers saying, hey, I completed this activity. So it can, these are called the activations or the triggers. When someone performs it, or when someone is at a specific location that they normally hang out or do a physical activity like a park or an accessible location, then they can use this type of a trigger to highlight to other friends of what they wish to do in that locality. They can also set their own goals. And also we found out from the feedback from our participants that they were also interested in seeing if there can be some sort of a group where individuals with similar assistive technology use or disabilities can recommend or offer the suggestions for their activity levels when they're performing it. Again, this was a collaboration between Temple McGee Rehabilitation Hospital and Northeastern University. This research was funded by is funded actually by NIDLR, or National Institute on Disability, Independent Living and Rehabilitation Research. Our next steps for this particular project is to develop this app. So far, we have done a usability analysis, like we have met with participants via Zoom, tried to obtain their needs. And these are basically like a paper cutout or information that we have, in collaboration with participants with SCI and their friends or family members have developed this. The next step for this would be to take it into the community to do a test run. And when we do that, we will be doing either short durations of 2 weeks or longer durations up to 6 months to see how this particular app can be developed using participatory design research or input from users as they use this type of technology. Another research that was recently funded by the National Institutes of Health was we working very closely with NICPAD. NICPAD is National Center for Health and Physical Activity for Individuals with Disabilities. This is based in University of Alabama, Birmingham or Lakeshore. And we are working with them to see how our technology, which is the smartphone, smartwatch-based technology, or just-in-time adaptive intervention technology, can be used to provide context-sensitive feedback or context-sensitive interventions as someone is performing a physical activity program that's provided by this center. Again, we have a number of collaborators here, one of them being University of Alabama, Birmingham, McGee Rehabilitation Hospital, Moss Rehabilitation Hospital, Thomas Jefferson University, University of Michigan, and Northeastern. This is an R01 grant that's funded by National Center for Medical Rehabilitation Research, which again is a part of the Eunice Kennedy Shriver National Institute of Child Health and Human Development at NIH. In addition to the research, what I thought is, to share with the members of this United Spinal Association chapter, what is it that you can take at this point in time? Again, I gave you an example of what technologies are available, but I wanted to also share some health and physical activity information that is available. That's, again, not developed by us. This is developed by other researchers and other experts in this particular field. And there are two of them. One is the National Center on Health, Physical Activity and Disability, with whom we are working on one of our research projects. And the other one being Physical Activity Guidelines for Adults with Spinal Cord Injury. Again, this is an international group, but the website and the lead investigator is Dr. Kathleen Martin Guinness, and she's from Canada. I'll also highlight that web page. So this is the web page for NICPAD. The short form is NICPAD. They have a number of resources with physical. They have a YouTube channel. There are some disability and aging fitness professionals. They also have coaches that are available for individuals to participate in regular physical activity. This is led by Dr. James Rimmer at University of Alabama, Birmingham, and Lakeshore Foundation. It's a very large center that has a lot of information. I think that's very useful for individuals with disabilities in general, and also a lot of information about individuals who use some assistive technologies like wheelchairs or canes, and provides a lot of wealth of information on the types of physical activities that are available. The other website that I wanted to highlight was the Physical Activity Guidelines for Adults with Spinal Cord Injury. This is the University of British Columbia, Okanagan campus. And in this, they have a website that, the link is here, that highlights or tells you the different types of FAQs, frequently asked questions, tools for success, resources, and the guidelines that they have developed. So just to highlight, I wanted to take one of their guidelines images here. And in this specific guideline, what they recommend for individuals with spinal cord injury, or for adults with spinal cord injury, was that 20 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity activity twice a week. That's for the aerobic activity. And this is starting at the beginner level or the initial level. And the second part is to do strength training activity, which is the 3 sets of 10 reps for each major group. Again, this strength training activity depends on the type of level of injury or the type of function that one may have. Are there impairments just in the lower body or upper body or trunk movements? So one has to take that into consideration and see what muscles they can control to perform these types of strength activities. So what this research group has indicated is doing activity levels at this gives cardiorespiratory fitness. However, if one wants cardiometabolic benefits, health benefits, and are able to sustain this type of an activity level on a regular basis, that's 40 minutes of moderate intensity activity, moderate to vigorous intensity activity for aerobic activity, and 3 times and twice a week strength training activities of 3 sets and 10 reps for each major muscle group, then they might go to the next level, which is advanced level. And in this, as you can see, the duration has increased from 40 minutes to it has become 90 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity aerobic activity, and also the strength training activity that seems to have remained the same, which is again twice a week. Now, if one were to add the times up at the advanced level, 90 minutes plus strength training that's performed at moderate to vigorous intensity activity, that I think would come close to about 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity activity that's recommended by the Center for Disease Control in the United States. Again, this is the guideline. This is the website for the guideline. I would like to acknowledge we have a number of collaborators, and this research would not have happened without the participants taking time from their daily busy life and providing us with data, and also being citizen scientists or participating in the sciences to push the envelope in terms of technologies and in terms of tracking physical activity levels. Again, I have listed a small number of collaborators here. We have a really large number of collaborators. I apologize if we have missed out on someone. The work that I showed you today was again funded by the Craig H. Nielsen Foundation, NIDLR, National Institute on Disability, Independent Living and Rehabilitation Research, and National Institutes of Health. These are the references, again, I have highlighted in the talk today. The work that I have presented here would not have been possible without the students in the lab. Alex, who is a PT, she's a home health physical therapist who worked for a few years at Penn and then has joined the PhD program to do or conduct research. Rachel is a master's student in the neuromotor science. Tessa is a PhD student. She worked at the Moss Rehabilitation Research Institute for about 3 years prior to coming to our lab to conduct research, her doctoral research. Steve is from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and he is conducting research that's related to music and how can music be used to improve function. Cole is a master's student who has recently joined our laboratory, and Melissa Nunn, who some of you might know is a peer support coordinator in the MEGI group, is our consumer advocate. So Melissa has been kind and has been part of some of the grants we have submitted and has also taken part in guiding us along the research on what we should do and what we should not do. So I'm very thankful for all the members of the lab who have made this possible. With that, I think I'm going to stop my presentation and I can take questions at this point.
Buddy? You? Okay. Anybody have questions? Okay, the whole hand raising thing down. Anybody's question? Yeah, I did have a question. Being a higher injury myself. So when you talk about exercising 4 major groups or 3 major groups trying to get an aggressive exercise in, and maybe you don't have all 3 major groups to exercise, like how could you translate? Any ideas on that, as far as people with higher injuries that might not have all arm movement,
major. I think two ways I can think of it. Again, we are in a COVID times where some of this may not be possible. What I can think of is using securements where depending on like how much trunk control one has, how much of arm movement one has, trying to exercise the muscles that are under voluntary control, that you can move, that one can exercise. And focusing more on warm-up flexibility exercises also. I think where it might be helpful is in an outpatient or outpatient setting, or in a gym setting where others can assist with some of the securement of the arms with accessible equipment. I think would be helpful to do to exercise or to assist with some of the muscles that are less accessible or that are less under control.
So as a follow-up, McGee does have an accessible gym piece to their outpatient center at Riverfront, and they do provide some assistance for people. So I'm just throwing that out there as a
Right.
commercial.
Right.
We are getting some questions in. I did have one other follow-up for
Go ahead. Yes.
my question, and then I'm sorry, guys, I don't mean to be
Sure.
hogging. But any of the devices, are they good? Can they record, like, if you're doing an arm bike or some of those higher injuries, if you're not manually operating a wheelchair, but you're maybe doing other exercise?
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. I think even if you're not, that's what we have done in our latest study, which is if you are using a power wheelchair, but can still use your arms to exercise. So then what we have done is instead of using the two devices, that one goes on the wheelchair wheel and the other on the arm, what we have simplified it to just using the wrist-based sensor. So that way it's independent of whether someone is using a manual wheelchair or a power wheelchair. And with technology developments, even some of the participants and some of the individuals we work with, even manual wheelchair users are now using assistive devices like smart drive or other types of devices, because again, that helps them in a community setting where their shoulder is preserved, the rotator cuff is preserved. So thereby what we can do is focus more on the upper extremity activities that that will help quantify physical activity, whether you're a higher level injury person who is using a power wheelchair or a manual wheelchair, as long as you're able to exercise. Our goal is to do personalized models, which is individualized models, if you may, wherein depending on the function and your abilities, what might be moderate intensity for you might not be the moderate intensity for someone with a lower level injury. So in that case, what we intend to do or plan to do is we try to see how we can adapt the technology, like the sensing technology, to your needs and your reported outcomes, like patient reported outcomes. So how can we build something that's more accessible, that is more beneficial for you and also helps you? It's not just saying that, hey, because you can't do wheelchair basketball, you get less brownie points. Now, if you're able to do certain physical activity levels where that itself feels to you is moderate to vigorous intensity activity, then how can we help you design something that is beneficial for you? And also, having talked to some of our participants are more willing to perform light intensity physical activity. It's more easier to do, and they don't have to think of, like, moderate intensity makes one think that, oh, I need to prepare for this, I need to warm up to this. But a light intensity physical activity is easier to pick up, to do, maybe 15 minutes in the day. So those are some of the things that we are looking at in this particular research. Hopefully that answers your question, Marie.
Yes, it did. Okay, so we have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Lauren, what are some of the more effective aerobic exercises for people with higher level injuries?
Right. I think building on what you mentioned, Marie, I think an arm ergometry or some sort of exercise. Again, the beauty with NICPAD is they also talk about using home-based devices, like what's available at home, what types of adaptations you can make at home to do home-based exercises. So again, I think for someone with higher level injury, if they are unable to obtain such an arm ergometry device or something of that nature, they can maybe do some strength-based or movement-based exercises with respect to music or whatever level of exercises they have. If they can identify or work with their clinicians saying, hey, can you suggest me, can you make a small program for me where I can move my activities and maybe build on music or build on something from, again, YouTube has become quite popular. Like, look at other individuals who are doing similar activities, and maybe you can do it with them on their videos. It is challenging. I agree with the question here from Lauren. It is challenging. It's a bit easier if you have an accessible gym nearby, and also therapists or the physical activity training folks there, if they are trained to work with somebody with disability or with higher level injury, I think they can help set it up, and maybe then you can do more exercise out of that.
We have another question. Is there a way for people who may not be able to afford all the technology, with wheelchair PA monitoring, to obtain it in a more affordable way?
Yes, technology is it's a treadmill. It keeps changing so fast. Some of the simple technologies that one could use, again, if they're a manual wheelchair user, for example, would be putting a bike odometer, like bicycle odometer, which is basically like one sensor goes on the wheelchair wheel, or goes on the, like it's a magnet that goes on your axle or on the rim of the wheelchair wheel, and then a device that can be secured to the spokes of the wheelchair wheel. That's some participants have done that. You could use GPS tracking on your smartphone in terms of seeing how far you have pushed yourself if you're using a manual wheelchair. Now, if you're using a power wheelchair, there is a compendium which basically says if you are doing moderate intensity activity exercises at home, how much it may translate to. And instead of using a technology or device, what you could probably do is set times that you are comfortable doing, like 10-minute exercises or 15-minute exercises, and use a timer to reach that goal as you perform those types of activities. Hopefully that makes sense. It is definitely a barrier, especially with the latest types of technology where the smartphones are becoming more expensive. The watch, like the Apple Watch, is also pretty expensive. The technology that we have tried to develop, which is Android, our smartwatch costs about $150 from the market, and the smartphones cost about $200. Again, it's still expensive, but one could use existing apps on the smartphones, such as the GPS or any other. Like if you go to a park, I think you can track, you can build a trail or build a pathway and then follow that. So you know what's the distance you have traveled, or the simple idea of keeping track with the number of blocks you're able to push your own wheelchair, or some sort of a outcome that you think will be able to relate to. Hopefully that answers the question for Hazel.
So one new message. Thank you. Lisa said thank you. How did you become interested in this work?
I actually, my undergraduate was in electrical and electronics engineering. I worked in a company for 2 years building robotics and automation. And I helped with a child with cerebral palsy with doing an augmentative and assistive communication aid in India. The devices that are available in the US, it used to be not that easy to get those types of devices in India. So that led me to get into assistive technologies. And I was very fascinated by movement, human movement, and physical activity. And doing physical activity can prevent a lot of secondary conditions as well as continue the quality of life. So that led me to this particular area of research. Thanks for the question. Yeah.
And another question. We have a participant, Dave, who wants to know how to get involved with, do you have any active openings right now for people to get involved in your research as participants to try out some of these devices?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. We have 2 studies. One of them is a usability study where we are currently gathering feedback from individuals with spinal cord injury. Again, research sometimes has certain limits on who, you have to meet certain criteria. They're called inclusion criteria. We work with our clinical collaborators at Maggie Rehabilitation Hospital, at Moss Rehabilitation Hospital, or at Thomas Jefferson. So we send it through their newsletters of these research studies, and that's how we have recruited participants in our study. But please feel free to contact me. We have one study that is starting in April of 2022, which is a larger 6-month physical activity intervention study where where individuals will get a physical activity program. But again, that's specifically for individuals with spinal cord injury who use power wheelchairs or manual wheelchairs to do exercise and physical activity. So I wish we were big and we could open up a lot more, but we are heading towards that to make these technologies accessible across disabilities or across assistive technologies that individuals use.
So you will be opening up. Part of that group will be including both paraplegics
Yes.
and some quadriplegics. Okay.
That's correct. Yes. Because we saw that, when we did in manual wheelchair users, again, we saw that we wanted to be as broad as possible. Of course, in this particular case, we will be able to only recruit participants who use wheelchairs as their primary means of mobility. That leads to exclusion of individuals who may be able to walk. But again, so we've had to put some limits, or our reviewers of research had asked us to put certain limits. And our hope is that individuals who use wheelchairs, if they are able to use these types of programs and technologies, it will help them continue with that technology, with that assistive technology use, and be more active in the community, and hopefully that leads to less secondary conditions. So in our pilot study that I showed, one thing that, again, we cannot prove because our research studies were not designed for it, but we could see when we can get the information when someone's activity levels goes down, that we know that they might not be doing well. And in fact, in some of the cases, we did see that, we stopped getting data from the participants. And when we contacted them after they were back, or after we were able to contact back, they in fact were hospitalized due to pneumonia or UTI and other conditions. So sometimes these sensors can pick up the reduction in activity, but these types of activity levels can maybe help reduce the secondary conditions or rehospitalization. David, thank you for the question. I think that's a large, tough question in terms of recruiting participants. We have done, our research studies are in the community, so we have done less lab work, more in the community. So we have been to anyone's home who are within 60 to 90 miles from Philadelphia. So we have been to Lancaster, Reading, we have been to Delaware, we have also visited people in New Jersey. So wherever, again, within a day's trip for us to be back in the lab, we work with participants who can allow us to come to their home or somewhere near their home where we can set these technologies up.
I have another question. So
Right.
how many participants will you be looking for with this new research in April?
We will be looking over the next 4 years, we'll be looking for 192 participants. So close to 200 participants over the next 4 years. So roughly about 40 to 50 participants a year is our target. In terms of, again, with COVID, it's a bit slower than we expected. We have some challenges with getting it up and running, but we will get there by April 2022.
So,
yes.
Very good. Anyone else have any other questions? Try raising your hands too. I think I have it down. All good. I don't want to miss anybody. Okay. Well, good. That was really, really very interesting. And it's nice to have such great research happening at our back door. So, where maybe you may be recruiting potential participants. You don't know right now. So that's really awesome. And and thank you for the information.
Yeah, and also likewise, thank you for listening to this talk. Again, for some of the audience, it might be, I don't know if it was too researchy or too, but thank you for your patience, and this is happening with your help and with your participation in Philadelphia.
That's great. Okay, well, thank you so much. This webinar will be available through recording. So, if you do want to watch it again, please click your link. I think it will take you directly there. And Shiv, I can't thank you enough for giving us all this information. It was very helpful.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you so much. Thank you again, the United Spinal Association of Greater Philadelphia, for inviting me. It's an honor. Thank you.
You are very welcome. So, okay, everyone, look for that link and you can try it through there. And thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you at our next webinar. Take care. Bye, Shiv. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, have a good one. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye. A lot of thank yous.